That's it. It's all it's ever been about. But quite astonishing that they seem to believe that this strategy is going to win over any fans.
But then I think there's another dimension to it.
Oh, good. Go on.
I think which I I don't think that anybody has alighted upon it yet. If Harry hives off from Meghan and she is containable, which of course nobody has ever been able to contain her. That was one of the ways I came to write my books about them, because I was leaked information in the hope that she would become containable. But she's uncontainable. But if Harry can do a lot of solo stuff, there is the hope amongst certain people at the palace that when the marriage breaks down or breaks up, might be a better way of putting it, that Harry will have already created sufficient distance between Meghan and himself for him to be able to make a more graceful exit than if they are a duo at all times. So I think there's always been the hope. Initially, when they exited, the Queen herself, the late Queen obviously, the Queen herself gave them a year in the hope that they would come to their senses. That's what she said, and come back. Nobody envisaged that they would hive off on the path that they have done. So the door was kept open for them. Well, of course, they have poisoned the pond to such an extent, but she has poisoned it irretrievably. He has poisoned it to the extent that the family, I don't think the family relations will ever be the same ever again.
All right, let's talk about the real bombshell here. The royal family has been preparing for this split for years. Even the late Queen Elizabeth gave Harry and Meghan a trial period, hoping they would reconsider. Instead, they doubled down, trashed the monarchy, and made enemies everywhere. But now, palace insiders are reportedly seeing an opportunity to separate Harry from Meghan. The goal? A graceful exit that restores Harry's ties with the family, without Meghan in the picture.
But if there were a divorce, it would be a more dignified way of extricating him from the situation as he goes to Botswana to tend elephants that are tethered and he can then pretend are in the wild.
Yes. Yes, indeed. It's still an astonishing strategy, though, for a couple who told the world that they work together like salt and pepper. And given that this is a woman who he has chosen to lose everything for, I mean, what do you think is happening within Harry's world? Do you think there's a dawning of a realization that actually my brother was probably right, my old friends were probably right? Or does he genuinely think that somehow she's going to become a really successful businesswoman?
I think he's partly hoping that she'll become a very successful businesswoman. My understanding of Harry as a personality is he never is wrong and never admits he's wrong. But he has certainly tried to crawl back into certain people's good graces, which suggests that whether he has admitted that he was wrong or not, he is aware. You know, marriages change over time, and Harry is, according to some people, perfectly happy in California and doesn't want to come back. And to other people, he is miserable in California and he wants to come back. I think if we distill the two sides, we can maybe arrive at that sometimes Harry is happy to be there, and he's certainly happy to be irresponsible and walking around stoned out of his mind and you know, throwing stones on the beach with the dogs and riding his bike with security following him. Harry has never been a great worker. Harry has never actually, I mean, he was a good performer in that, you know, before he married Meghan, he had the hail fellow well met cheeky chappy act down pat. But I mean, Harry was always there for the show. He rarely wasn't there for the go. And so I think to an extent, whatever happens, he's not going to ever again be a heavy-hitting royal, but it suits the royal family and it suits the British political scene to have him being less of a pariah. It doesn't matter about her, she's expendable, but he's not so easily expendable because he is royal.
And here's what's really fascinating. This explains Harry's new solo projects. His work in Africa, his sudden shift away from Meghan-led ventures. It's all part of the long-term plan. The palace is making sure that when, not if, the divorce happens, Harry is already distanced from Meghan. That way, Meghan can't drag him back into another scandal-driven PR disaster. And folks, this means that the palace is done with Meghan.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, wasn't it, this tour to Africa, because it didn't spark much attention at all. It was relatively low-key, but it was very clear that Harry thought he could use it for PR purposes and to go back to the happy-go-lucky guy he used to be. There was a very clear sort of changes in his agenda. And there was one video, I think, Lady C, that represented it best for me. And it was when he was with a group in South Africa and he attempted to replicate that moment that King Charles had with the New Zealand female rugby team. But the difference to me was that with King Charles and the rugby team, King Charles had no idea about it. It was a very genuine moment. But with Prince Harry, he prompted the moment happening himself. So I'll show you the video and then get you to react off the back.
Sorry, keep spreading the love.
Thank you that you spent so much time with us. For such an icon, so modest, oh my word.
Oh, are you all happy?
I'll put that on my resume.
Did we have one group hug? One, two, three, South Africa. 1, 2, 3. South Africa!
So that felt cynical to me, Lady C. What about you?
Opportunistic, and Harry is married to a pastiche, and you know he's become something of a pastiche himself. It's sort of, well, let's see what worked for everybody else and maybe we can get it to work for us as well. But there's a heck of a difference between something that's spontaneous and natural and something that's contrived. But Meghan is a study in contrivance. And Harry, without having been contrived, he was always a performer. Let's remember, he was a performer. Cheeky chappy, hail fellow well-met Harry was the facade. There was a whole other Harry that was going on. I know from people who worked with him that they would have to bend elbows to get him to do certain things. Then, of course, he'd be, look at what a fabulous time I'm having. But so he and Meghan, he's taking a leaf out of Meghan's book now. It worked for Charles, it will work for him. And to an extent, it does work, because he manages to dupe some of the people some of the time.
Now let's talk about what happens when Meghan finds out about this plan. If the palace is truly planning for Harry to leave, Meghan will not take this quietly. She has spent years carefully crafting her image as a victim. If Harry starts creating distance, Meghan will need a new narrative. Expect her to push even harder on her Meghan versus the monarchy storyline. So what's next? Could she go for another bombshell interview, this time throwing Harry under the bus? Would she push for an expensive divorce settlement, playing the victim once again? Or will she try to rebrand and distance herself from the royal drama altogether? And here's where it gets really interesting. Hollywood is over Meghan Markle. Her Spotify deal collapsed. Netflix is frustrated with her lack of content. Even A-list celebrities are distancing themselves from her. If Meghan loses Harry, what does she have left? Folks, Meghan might be running out of moves.
So it's effective up to a point.
Yeah, I think. I agree, but I think a lot of people have seen through it now, well and truly. I certainly have. And
this is the point I'm trying to make as well. That the Queen would never have done something like that. She believed in being true and real, and let things evolve naturally. Harry, by going down the pastiche route, it might work for some of the time with some of the people, but it never works for all of the people all of the time. And it furthers the disregard that people have for him. And it increases the lack of respect that people have for him.
And he's 40. He's 40. It was cute when he was a young lad. He's 40 now, and we know what he's like and what he's done to his family. So what's the plan now for Meghan? Are we just going to see more of these sort of awful Kim Kardashian cheap stunts? And actually, I think that's a bit of an offense to Kim Kardashian, because I saw Kim Kardashian, for example, at the White House this week, and she was very appropriately dressed. Whether you agree with her cause or not, she's fighting to free the Menendez brothers, and she is taking on important issues while doing her celebrity stuff. So actually, it's probably quite unfair in some ways to compare Meghan to Kim Kardashian now. But the point that I'm making, is this it now? Is this it? Are we just back to celebrity, turns up drunk to events and tries to make some money by flogging crap jam? Is that it now?
I think that's about it, Dan. I mean, where's she going to go from here? She is box office poison. She's toxic in Hollywood. Nobody wants to associate with her unless they can derive a benefit from it. And it's usually because they're not going to get the publicity for their minor event. And whether it's Kevin Costner or someone else, Meghan will create controversy and Harry and get them more publicity. But that doesn't mean Kevin Costner is going to cost her in Bodyguard, nor does it mean that anybody of any let me say, I had lunch day before yesterday with a friend of mine who was married to one of the top names in Hollywood. And she has a lot of friends in Santa Barbara. And she made the point that nobody wants to have anything to do with Harry or Meghan. People don't like her. She is pretentious. She's uppity. She has an air of superiority, or then she's a hustler. So it's one bad thing and flip over, and it's another bad thing. And I really do not see her succeeding. I mean, well, she's succeeding to fail, but she certainly hasn't succeeded to succeed.
All right, let's break down the big questions. If Harry and Meghan divorce, what happens to their royal titles? Would King Charles strip Meghan of her Duchess status? The money. Who keeps what from their Netflix and book deals? The kids. Would Archie and Lilibet still be considered royal? And here's the really interesting part. Harry has been moving his assets away from Meghan. His new projects are separate from their joint brand. His personal net worth is growing, outside of Meghan's control. Could this be part of the long-term divorce plan? If Meghan sees this coming, expect her to start laying the groundwork for a messy, drawn-out battle. She'll paint herself as the victim. She'll fight for control of the Sussex brand. And she might even start preemptively throwing shade at Harry. Folks, this could get ugly fast. Palace insiders are planning for Harry's solo future, without Meghan.
And, let's see what happens with
Well,
that.
indeed. But I agree, Lady C. I can't see her succeeding. So, by the way, I have huge sympathy as to why King Charles is completely gripped with fear about Harry returning with the begging bowl and wanting money. And I think it's a genuine concern, actually, because I know he just got the inheritance. But Lady C, they are burning through cash. And yes, there will always be some corporations who are prepared to pay for them to buy into the fact that they've got a member of the royal family on the books. But not that many anymore. And certainly not in the numbers that they were being provided by the likes of Netflix and Spotify. Those days are over. And so the grift is going to be more difficult. We know that neither of them have a good work ethic. I mean, they're both actually lazy. Let's be honest about it. And I think Charles has a reason to be worried. I could see them coming. I mean, William won't have any of it. I mean, once it's William on the throne, the idea that he would give money to Harry and Meghan is just laughable. But I can see why Charles is genuinely concerned that his youngest is going to start asking for handouts again quite soon.
Yes, but remember, he was asking his father for handouts when he left.
Yes.
And his father gave him 2.5 million and said, "That's it, bud, you're on your own." And his father just refused to give him any more money and refused to take his calls. And his father is not the pushover that people seem to think he is. I can well see why any parent with a child who's that problematic would have a dilemma as to the degree of funding that you are morally obliged as a parent to provide, considering the circumstances. And it's always less than they want. Let's put it that way. But I mean, it would be unrealistic of anybody to expect that a king would allow his son to end up dossing on the Bowery. I mean, it's not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen. But that doesn't mean he's not going to have to move into a smaller place, etc., etc. But what is interesting is that my understanding is that no one in the royal family wants to subsidize Meghan even to a sou or a farthing. And therefore, as long as they're together, that's if they really run into serious trouble, it is quite possible that the family will feel, well, we'll give him maybe an allowance of 100,000 per annum.
Yes.
And thereafter, Harry, you're on your own. And
well,
then
indeed.
All of a sudden, Meghan will be burning up the telephone wires with all of the billionaires asking for help.
Yes. And we know that's why she's befriending these billionaires, which is all very odd too.
Meghan's Hollywood career is sinking. How will she react? A divorce could mean the end of Meghan's royal status, but will she fight back? And if Harry finally returns to the royal family, can he ever repair the damage? At some point, even their biggest defenders have to admit, this marriage looks doomed. Harry is creating distance. And Meghan's options are running out. Will Meghan fight back? Or is this the end of the Sussex saga?